I remember that Saturday evening like it was yesterday. I'd been holding on to my father's gold pocket watch all week, thinking I'd give it to my granddaughter Emily for her wedding. My hands felt heavier than usual as I climbed the wide marble steps to Ryan's house, Emily's fiancé. The place looked more like a high-end art gallery than a home, all glass walls, polished stone, and the kind of furniture you'd never dare sit on. Emily appeared from the kitchen, her smile bright but just a touch too tight. "Grandpa, you made it!" she said, kissing my cheek and glancing at the small wrapped box in my hand. "It's your great-grandfather's watch," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thought you might like to have it for the big day." From the living room, Ryan emerged with a glass of Cabernet, dressed like he just stepped out of a glossy magazine. His eyes drifted over my pressed khakis and clean polo, the nicest clothes I owned, but I could tell they didn't measure up to his standards. "Harold," he greeted me with a quick, cool handshake. "Still working at that steakhouse downtown?" "Bayside Grill." I nodded. "Frank's been good to me." He gave a little shrug before eyeing the gift in my hands. "What's in the box?" Emily beamed. "Grandpa's watch." I opened the paper carefully, revealing the gleaming gold timepiece, its chain coiled neatly inside the box. Emily's eyes lit up, but Ryan barely glanced at it. "Vintage," he said flatly. "Might fetch a little from a collector." The words stung more than I expected. This wasn't about value on a sales slip. It was about history, about love carried through generations. Before I could say anything, Emily's Aunt Karen called from the dining room that dinner was ready. The dining table was set like something from a lifestyle magazine, crystal stemware catching the light from a chandelier big enough to need its own zip code. Emily motioned me to a seat, and I tried to blend into the polished perfection around me. I asked how the wedding plans were going. Ryan carved into his fillet with precision. "We're keeping it intimate," he said. "Close friends, business associates, and of course family," Emily added. Ryan's, of course, didn't sound much like a promise. I noticed the sideways glances, the short replies whenever I tried to make small talk. Finally, he set down his fork and gave me the kind of look you'd expect from a boss firing an employee. "Harold," he said, "I think we should talk." Emily froze, fork halfway to her mouth. "It's about the wedding," Ryan went on, leaning back with the confidence of a man in complete control. "We've invited influential people, tech leaders, investors, local officials. This isn't just a celebration, it's an important networking event." A prickle of unease crept up my neck. "And?" He met my gaze without flinching. "You're a waiter, Harold. My guests move in different circles. Your presence might not fit the atmosphere." It was like being punched in the chest. The room went quiet. "That's my grandfather," Emily said sharply. "I know," Ryan replied smoothly. "But I have to protect the tone of the event. I can't risk my reputation over sentimentality." I thought of the years I'd worked double shifts to help pay for Emily's tuition, her first car, her first apartment. I opened my mouth, but Ryan cut me off again. "You serve food for a living," he said. "My guests shape industries, pass legislation, fund entire companies. Do you honestly think you belong in that conversation?" The blood roared in my ears. Emily's voice broke through faintly, but I barely heard it. Ryan stood, gesturing toward the sliding glass doors. "Let's continue this outside." We stepped onto a terrace that overlooked a manicured lawn where workers were setting up for the wedding. Strings of lights hung between trees. The city skyline shimmered beyond the fence. "This house cost me $3 million," Ryan said casually, as though reciting the weather. "The wedding alone? 200,000. Flowers, 15 grand. The photographer, another 8. Emily's dress, 12,000. Each number landed like a hammer. "I paid for her college," I said, my voice steady. 4 years at Ohio State, rent, her car, all from the tips I earned. That was then. he said coldly. This is now. She's my responsibility. And I'm telling you, you won't be at this wedding. I looked down at the watch in my hand, the weight of 100 years of family history pressing against my palm. You can't just. I can't, he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. The mayor will be there. A senator. CEOs whose influence could shape our future. I won't have you turning her wedding into a charity case. I could see Emily pacing inside, watching us through the glass. Fine, I said at last, barely above a whisper. I won't come. Ryan's eyes flickered with satisfaction. Glad we understand each other. As I turned to go inside, he added, Leave the watch. Emily doesn't need reminders of complications. I tightened my grip on the box, walked past Emily's worried gaze, and out the front door. The drive home took me through 3 different worlds. First, Ryan's gated neighborhood with its sweeping lawns and imported stone fountains. Then the middle-class streets where porches sagged slightly and basketball hoops leaned over cracked driveways. Finally, my part of town, apartment blocks stacked shoulder to shoulder like old friends keeping each other warm. My building didn't have a doorman or polished marble floors. Just a buzzing fluorescent light in the lobby and a row of mailboxes with chipped paint. I climbed 2 flights, each step heavier than the last, and let myself into my 1-bedroom apartment. The quiet hit me first. No glittering chandeliers here, no curated art on the walls. Just photos of Emily, pigtails at age 5, high school graduation, her first apartment keys in hand, moments I'd worked for, sacrificed for. I set the watch on my kitchen table and stared at it. Ryan had called it vintage, as if the only worth in this thing came from a price tag. My father had carried it every day, winding it each morning before heading to the steel mill. His father had done the same before him. It wasn't gold that made it valuable. It was the years, the hands that had held it, the lives it had witnessed. I pulled a calculator from my desk drawer and started adding. 4 years of tuition at Ohio State, $112,000. Rent and utilities for her apartment, $18,000. Her first car, $3,000 down payment. Security deposit when she moved, $1,500. The numbers blurred together, but the total landed north of $200,000. Every dollar earned 1 plate at a time, 1 polite smile at a stranger's table, 1 aching double shift. The phone buzzed. Emily's name. Grandpa, she said, voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry about tonight. It's all right, sweetheart. No, it's not. He had no right to talk to you like that. You should be at my wedding. I closed my eyes. Sometimes life isn't fair, Em. But I'll find a way to be there for you. How? He meant it. He won't change his mind. Through my kitchen window, I could see the lights of downtown, the Bayside Grill tucked between glass office towers. 15 years I'd worked there, invisible in my black vest and white shirt. Don't worry about me, I told her. Just focus on being happy. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, Ryan's words echoing in my head. You're a waiter. He said it like a sentence, a label that erased the rest of who I was. But he'd made one mistake. He'd forgotten what being a waiter meant. We move unseen. We hear everything. We witness people at their most guarded and their most unguarded, slipping through moments without leaving a ripple. If I wanted to, I could stand 3 feet from Ryan all night without him realizing I was there. The thought took root, steady and stubborn. By morning, I was dressed and driving toward the restaurant. Bayside was quiet at this hour, the dining room stripped bare of its evening glamour. Frank's SUV was already in the lot. I wanted to talk to him before the other staff arrived. Inside, the smell of coffee mingled with the sharp tang of fresh onions. Frank stood at the prep counter, moving his knife with the confidence of a man who'd done this for decades. You're early, he said without looking up. Saturday's shift doesn't start until 10. Couldn't sleep. I poured 2 mugs of coffee, adding sugar to his the way I always did. Frank, I need a favor. He stopped slicing, finally meeting my eyes. It's Emily's wedding tomorrow, I began. I heard. Big country club out in Brookdale, right? Fancy place? Yeah. But Ryan doesn't want me there. The knife clattered onto the board. What do you mean? Says I'm not good enough for his guests. Too embarrassing. Just a waiter. Frank's jaw tightened. He told you that to your face? I nodded. That's not a man, Harold. That's a boy in a suit. That's why I need your help, I said. Hire me for tomorrow. Just one day. The catering crew could use an extra set of hands. He stared at me like I'd suggested robbing a bank. You want to work your own granddaughter's wedding? It's the only way I'll see her walk down that aisle. He can't keep me out if I'm staff. I'll be invisible. Frank shook his head. A father should be in the front row, not serving cocktails. Sometimes we take what we can get, I replied. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, The catering's being handled by Blue Harbor Events. But I know the manager, Pete Marino. We worked together back in '98. I'll call him. He owes me. Hope flared in my chest. You'd do that? Frank's eyes softened. Harold, I've seen you put in more honest work than most people half your age. If that kid can't see your worth, that's his problem. Be at the club by 11 tomorrow. Pete will expect you. Relief flooded through me. Thank you, Frank. I won't forget it. Don't thank me yet, he warned. Ryan strikes me as the type who won't let this go without a fight. By early afternoon, I was back at Bayside, tying tablecloths tight over polished oak tables and lining up crystal glasses until they gleamed like they'd been cut from ice. The work kept my mind steady, my hands moving, but the clock ticked slower than usual. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Around 3 o'clock, I heard voices drifting in from the lobby, one bright and familiar, one heavier and colder. Emily's laugh reached me first, then Ryan's sharper tone. The flowers need to go there, he was saying. Not blocking the dance floor. I froze for half a second, then forced myself to keep adjusting the table I was working on. I hadn't expected to see them before the wedding day, and it caught me off guard. Grandpa! Emily spotted me from the doorway, her eyes lighting up before she glanced at Ryan. I smiled, trying to keep things neutral. She stepped inside, casual clothes and sneakers, cheeks flushed with that pre-wedding mix of excitement and stress. Behind her, Ryan's face shifted from surprise to suspicion to irritation. What are you doing here? Working, I said, keeping my voice professional. Frank asked me to help with setup. You can't be serious. Emily stepped between us. What's wrong now? Your grandfather is manipulating the situation, Ryan said, his voice rising. I told him not to come to the wedding, so he sneaks in as staff. I'm here to do a job, I said simply, straightening another chair. This is manipulation, Ryan snapped. You're trying to humiliate me in front of my guests. I shook my head. Your guests won't even notice I'm here. Ryan jabbed a finger toward me. This wedding costs more than you'll make in 5 years. I won't have you turning it into some sad display of pride. My jaw tightened. My pride's intact. His laugh was sharp. Is it? Then why this little charade? Because she's my granddaughter, I said evenly. And when she walks down that aisle, I'm going to be there. Whether you see me or not. Emily's eyes filled with tears, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. Grandpa, you don't have to. Yes, I do, I told her. But don't worry. Your guests will never know I'm here. Ryan's expression hardened. We'll see about that. He turned on his heel, storming out, Emily following close behind, her face torn between loyalty and love. They were barely gone 5 minutes before Frank came out of his office, his expression set in a way that made my stomach tighten. Your son-in-law to be came back, he said, an hour ago. Made me an offer, $5,000 cash if I kept you off the crew tomorrow. 5,000. For a moment I pictured the stack of bills, the rent it could cover, the repairs it could fund at the restaurant. What did you tell him? I asked quietly. That my staff isn't for sale, Frank said, his voice flat. Then he threatened to call in a health inspection, start trouble with our liquor license. Said he had friends in City Hall? He's not bluffing, I said. He probably does. Frank's eyes narrowed. I've been running this place 20 years. I've dealt with bigger bullies than him. He offered me 10,000 before he left. Still didn't take it. That was Frank, stubborn as the brick walls of the place he'd built. Tomorrow, he said, you work. And if he wants to make a scene, he'll regret it. I nodded, though a cold weight settled in my chest. Ryan wasn't just trying to keep me away, he was desperate. That made him dangerous. As the evening light slanted through the tall windows, I finished setting the last table. Everything was perfect, the linen fold sharp, the silverware aligned like soldiers. Tomorrow, this room would hold his kind of people, power-dressed and polished, each handshake worth more than my year's wages. But somewhere in the middle of all that, I'd see Emily smile in her wedding gown. That was all that mattered. Sunday morning broke clear and bright, the kind of crisp autumn day brides dream about. I was up before dawn, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, staring at the black pants and white dress shirt I'd laid out the night before. To most people, they were just work clothes. To me, they were camouflage, the uniform of invisibility. By 8:30 I was on the road, my old Chevy humming along the highway toward Brookdale Country Club. The further I drove, the bigger the houses became. Tree-lined streets gave way to gates with guards, and finally, the sprawling clubhouse came into view, its white columns and manicured lawns looking like something out of a postcard. Pete Marino, the catering manager, was already there when I pulled into the service lot. He was a stocky guy with salt and pepper hair and a handshake that could crack walnuts. You must be Harold, he said, giving me a once-over. Frank told me you've got decades of experience. Glad to have you on the crew. Glad to be here, I said, keeping my voice even. Inside, the banquet hall was already humming with activity. Servers moved like clockwork, setting centerpieces, folding napkins into perfect triangles, polishing wine glasses until they sparkled. The place was breathtaking, towering arrangements of white roses and lilies on every table, gold-trimmed plates, crystal stemware that caught the light from the chandeliers. Station 4, Pete told me, pointing toward the far corner near the head table. You'll be handling champagne service during the reception. Keep it topped off, keep moving. It was exactly what I wanted, close enough to see Emily, but never the center of attention. At 5 o'clock sharp, the first guests began arriving. They stepped out of luxury cars in designer suits and gowns, their laughter echoing across the marble entryway. I kept my head down, offering flutes of champagne with a polite smile. Lovely evening, one woman said as she took a glass. Her diamond bracelet probably cost more than my apartment. Enjoyed the celebration, I replied, moving on to the next table. From my position, I could see Emily and Ryan making their grand entrance. Emily was radiant in her gown, a vision of joy even under the weight of the day. Ryan looked like a man hosting his own coronation, shaking hands, slapping backs, laughing a little too loud. Every so often, his eyes would sweep the room and land on me. He didn't say a word, but the tightness in his jaw told me exactly what he was thinking. I told you to stay away. I kept working, circulating with my tray, topping off glasses. The guests chatted about stock prices, real estate deals, political campaigns. I might as well have been furniture for all the notice they gave me, which was exactly the point. At the head table, the speeches began. Emily's maid of honor told a sweet story about college days, making Emily laugh and wipe at her eyes. Ryan's best man gave a polished toast about friendship and ambition. Then Ryan himself stood, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. The room quieted immediately. He began warmly enough, thanking everyone for coming, talking about shared values, and celebrating success. But then, his tone shifted. Success, he said, is knowing your place in the world, surrounding yourself with people who matter, people who build, achieve, lead. Something cold settled in my gut. And of course, he went on, there are those who serve, who make these moments possible, but aren't part of them. Like our staff here tonight. His eyes locked on me. Take Harold, for instance. Just a waiter. Spent his life serving tables. Never built anything, never achieved anything lasting. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Emily's face went pale. I set the champagne bottle on the nearest table, my hands steady, and said evenly, would anyone like more champagne? A couple of guests nodded. I began pouring, my movements precise, my smile professional. Ryan's voice faltered. The moment he'd clearly been building toward, my humiliation, slipped away from him like sand through his fingers. The room's energy shifted, a few people starting quiet conversations to fill the awkward silence. I kept moving, my back straight, my tray balanced perfectly. Ryan had wanted to make me small. Instead, he made himself look smaller. I wasn't there to win an argument. I was there for Emily. And the night was far from over. 15 minutes had passed since Ryan's speech fizzled into awkward silence. The room had regained some of its earlier chatter, but I could tell the mood wasn't the same. Conversations felt strained, laughs a little too forced. I kept making my rounds, offering second pours and clearing empty glasses. Near the far wall, a young man in his 20s sat scrolling through his phone while half watching the muted television mounted above the bar. The country club liked to play classic films during events, an elegant distraction that didn't overpower the room. I was wiping down a nearby table when I noticed the kid freeze mid-scroll, eyes locked on the screen. His mouth fell open. "Oh my God!" he blurted, loud enough to turn a few heads. "That's the same guy." The ripple started small, a few guests glancing up at the screen, then at me, then back again. On the TV, in crisp black and white, a young naval officer in full dress uniform was delivering lines to someone off camera. His face was mine, 3 decades younger. "That's him," the young man insisted, standing now and pointing. "That's our waiter." An older woman in an emerald dress leaned forward in her chair, squinting at the screen. Then her face lit up. "I remember this movie. He was wonderful." The murmurs grew louder. People started pulling out phones, searching movie databases, showing each other side-by-side photos. Someone read aloud. "Harold Matthews, 7 major films between 1989 and 1996. Golden Globe nomination for Atlantic Crossing." Across the room, Ryan's hand slipped on his champagne glass, the crystal tipping and clinking sharply against his plate. He stared at the television like it had just betrayed him personally. I kept working, collecting plates and refilling drinks as though nothing had happened. But the air in the room had changed completely. Guests were leaning in toward me, not away. There were smiles now, warm, curious, and more than one phone aimed in my direction. Finally, a voice called out, "Why didn't you say anything?" I straightened, holding my tray at my side. "Because tonight isn't about me," I said simply. That seemed to land harder than any speech could have. The room quieted, eyes following me as I moved between tables. In my peripheral vision, I saw Emily's face, wide-eyed, her hand pressed to her mouth. Not shame. Not confusion. Just dawning understanding. A woman in her 60s caught my arm as I passed. "You gave all that up?" she asked softly. I nodded toward Emily. "For her." She smiled through misty eyes. Then you didn't give up anything that mattered. I moved on, my steps steady, my back straight. Ryan remained frozen at the head table, watching as the narrative slipped entirely out of his control. The man he'd called just a waiter had suddenly become the evening's most interesting guest. And from the way the crowd's energy was shifting, I had a feeling this night wasn't done surprising him. It started with Emily. She pushed her chair back from the head table and began weaving her way through the crowd, her wedding dress brushing against chairs and catching the light like flowing water. Guests stepped aside to let her pass, their conversations dropping into hushed tones. When she reached me, she took my hands in hers. They were trembling, not from nerves, but from the weight of realization. "Grandpa," she said, her voice unsteady, "why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because the past doesn't define us, Em," I said gently. "What matters is right now. You. This day." Her eyes glistened. "You gave up everything for me." "I gained everything," I corrected. "A granddaughter who became an extraordinary woman. No film role could have given me that." Her lip trembled, and then she was in my arms, her veil draping over my shoulder. The guests around us had gone completely silent. It wasn't the kind of quiet that demanded a speech. It was the kind that comes when people are holding their breath, not wanting to break the moment. Somewhere near the back, an older gentleman in a tux stood and said, "You're a true gentleman, sir." The words broke the dam. Applause began softly, then swelled until the whole room was on its feet. People clinked glasses, raised toasts, and a few even whistled. I didn't look at Ryan right away. I didn't need to. I could feel the heat of his discomfort from across the room. This was no longer his stage. Antonio, no, here, it was Frank, emerged from the kitchen in his crisp black jacket, smiling like a man who'd just won a long, quiet war. 20 years of friendship were in that smile, and he didn't need to say a word. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice called from somewhere near the bar. "To Harold Matthews, a man who knows what really matters." "To Harold!" the crowd echoed. Emily pulled back just far enough to look at me again. "I'm proud to be your granddaughter," she whispered. Finally, I allowed myself to glance at Ryan. He was still seated at the head table, champagne glass untouched, his face pale and unreadable. But the tension in his jaw told me everything. The carefully crafted image he tried to project tonight had shattered. The celebration moved on. Guests came by my station to shake my hand, share a memory of one of my old films, or simply say, "Thank you." Some even asked for a photo, and I obliged, though I kept the focus light and the conversation brief. When the crowd thinned enough for me to slip away, I made my way toward the coffee station tucked into the back corner of the hall. I needed a moment, just one small pocket of quiet in the middle of all this noise. I poured a cup, the steam curling upward, and took a deep breath. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Harold Matthews, you old fraud," it said with a grin I hadn't seen in decades. I turned to find Frank Morgan, an actor friend from my Hollywood days, standing there, silver hair perfectly styled, tuxedo sharp enough to cut glass. "Frank?" I said, laughing despite myself. "Your Emily invited me weeks ago," he said. "Didn't tell me it was you working here. Imagine my face when I see the great Harold Matthews hiding behind a serving tray." "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm working." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You know they're still airing Atlantic Crossing every month? You're a cult classic now. There's even talk of a documentary about actors who walked away at their peak, and your name's at the top of the list." "That was a lifetime ago," I said. "You're telling me you wouldn't come back if the right role landed in your lap?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "I'm telling you I'm exactly where I want to be." Frank studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You always did know what mattered." We stood there in companionable silence for a while, watching Emily across the room as she laughed with her bridesmaids. She looked happy. Really happy. That was enough for me. But the night wasn't over yet, and from the way Ryan was now fidgeting at the head table, I could tell something was coming. Ryan rose from his chair like a man walking towards something he wasn't sure he wanted to face. The noise in the room dimmed as he made his way to the microphone stand, each click of his shoes sharp against the hardwood floor. He tapped the mic once. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, but his usual polished tone was gone. "Earlier tonight I said things that were inexcusable." A hush fell over the room. Even the kitchen doors stopped swinging for a moment. "I want to apologize," he said, turning to look directly at me. "Especially to Harold. He's not just a waiter. He's a father, and a man who gave up fame and opportunity to raise his granddaughter with love and devotion." A ripple of surprise moved through the guests. This wasn't the smooth, rehearsed Ryan they'd seen all evening. This was something else, something that might have been genuine. "I judged him by the wrong standards," Ryan continued. "By income, by status, when I should have recognized the depth of his character. Harold Matthews is more of a man than I realized, and I'm sorry it took tonight for me to see it." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on me again. "If you'll accept it, I'd like to start over. Not as the son-in-law who tried to keep you away, but as the man who welcomes you, and honors you, as part of our family." The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the sound system. All eyes were on me. I set down the tray I'd been carrying and walked toward the head table, my steps slow but steady. Emily's eyes were shining, her hands pressed together near her heart. "Thank you, Ryan," I said when I reached him. "Family is what matters most. Everything else is just noise." I extended my hand. He took it with both of his, and for the first time that night, there was no competition in the grip. No posturing. Just something that felt like the beginning of understanding. "I was scared," he said in a low voice, "just for me. Scared you'd make me look small in front of them." "You did that yourself," I said gently. "But we can move forward." Emily was on her feet then, moving to wrap her arms around both of us. "I love you both," she said, her voice breaking, but this time with relief, not pain. The guests rose, their applause filling the room, but it wasn't the polite clapping of earlier. It was warm. It was real. Frank appeared at the edge of the crowd, raising his glass toward me with a small, knowing smile. Frank from my Hollywood days had always thrived on the spotlight. Me? I'd found something better. When the noise settled, Ryan turned back to the microphone. "Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating love and new beginnings. It took me too long to realize that love means honoring the people who helped shape the person you're marrying. So," he raised his glass, "to Harold Matthews, actor, father, and the man who taught my wife what true success means." "To Harold!" the guest echoed again, this time with laughter and genuine cheer. Emily slipped her arm through mine. "Would you dance with me, Grandpa? Father-daughter style?" I smiled. "Always." We stepped onto the dance floor, the music beginning softly as the guests formed a circle around us. In the mirrored wall to my left, I caught sight of my reflection, still in the waiter's vest and bow tie, but somehow taller, lighter. Not an employee anymore, not an outsider. Just a grandfather dancing with the girl he'd raised. And for the first time all night, Ryan was smiling too, not the smile of a man hosting a perfect event, but of someone finally seeing the whole picture. Emily's hand was small in mine, but her grip was sure, her eyes locked on mine as if the rest of the world had fallen away. The first notes of the song drifted from the speakers, slow, steady, familiar. "I used to make you stand on my shoes when we danced in the living room," I told her, smiling at the memory. She laughed softly. "I remember. You always let me lead. Only because you were bossy," I teased. Around us, guests swayed gently, watching. Not judging, not whispering. just present. Some smiled like they were seeing their own fathers in me. Others looked at Emily like she was the luckiest bride they'd ever met. When the song ended, she hugged me tight. "Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for everything. Sweetheart," I said. "There's nowhere else I'd ever be." The rest of the evening flowed in a way I hadn't expected. Ryan, now noticeably humbled, came by our table a few times to check on me, small talk, light jokes. He even introduced me to a couple of his business friends as my father-in-law, who's had a much more interesting life than I ever will. It wasn't perfect. A single night can't erase years of pride, but it was a start. Guests continued to approach me, some asking for stories from the old film days, others simply offering a handshake and a "well done." I kept my answers short, steering the focus back to Emily and Ryan. Later, near the dessert table, Frank cornered me again. "You sure you're done with the business?" "I'm sure," I said. "I've already had the role of a lifetime." He gave a slow nod. "Most people spend their lives chasing applause. You found something better." By the time the last song played, the hall had thinned. Staff moved quietly between tables, clearing glasses, gathering plates. Emily was still glowing, laughing with her friends, but I could see the fatigue starting to settle in. Weddings are marathons, no matter how beautiful. I slipped away toward the kitchen, hanging my vest and bow tie on a hook. My shirt was damp from hours of work, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. On my way out, Ryan stopped me by the side door. "Harold," he said, "I don't know if I can ever make up for tonight. But I'm going to try." "That's all anyone can do," I said. He hesitated, then extended his hand again. I shook it. This time there was no tension in the grip, just a quiet understanding that we were, at last, on the same side. The drive home was slow, my headlights cutting through the cool night air. I passed from manicured streets into humbler neighborhoods, and finally back to my little apartment building with the peeling paint and flickering hallway light. Inside, I set my old coffee mug on the counter and sank into my armchair. The room was silent except for the hum of the fridge. On the table sat a single photograph of Emily at age 6, missing 2 front teeth, grinning at me with her whole face. Tonight I thought I'd given her a gift she might not even understand until years from now, the knowledge that she could always count on me, no matter the cost. And that was worth more than any applause I'd ever earned on a movie set. I woke to the sound of rain tapping lightly against the window. The world outside was gray and quiet, the kind of morning that makes you linger over coffee just to hear the gentle rhythm on the glass. My back ached from yesterday's hours on my feet, but I didn't mind. It was a good ache, the kind you earn. I poured my coffee and sat at the table, the steam curling up into the cool air. On the table sat my old leather watch box, the one I'd almost left behind on Ryan's terrace weeks ago. I opened it, running my fingers over the smooth gold casing of my father's pocket watch. It ticked steadily, as if reminding me that time moves forward no matter what storms you weather. A knock came at the door. When I opened it, Emily was standing there in jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, makeup free. She looked younger, like the little girl who used to climb into my lap to watch Saturday morning cartoons. "Morning, Grandpa," she said softly. "Morning, Em. You're up early for a newlywed." She smiled and stepped inside, her eyes scanning my small apartment. "Ryan's sleeping in. I wanted to see you." I poured her a cup of coffee and we sat together at the table. For a while neither of us spoke. The rain did the talking for us. Finally she said, "I don't know if I've ever been prouder than I was last night. Not just because of who you were, but because of who you are." I swallowed hard, looking down at my cup. "I'm just your grandpa, Em." "No," she said firmly. "You're the man who taught me what it means to stand your ground without hurting people. You didn't fight Ryan with anger, you showed him who you are, and you let him come to you. That was the only way it was going to work." I said. Pride's a stubborn thing. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I think he gets it now. We talked after you left. He admitted he was wrong. I gave a small smile. That's a good start. Her eyes drifted to the watch box. You never told me much about him, your dad. I pushed the box toward her. He was a quiet man. Didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. This watch was his, then mine. I was going to give it to you at the wedding, but I think now's the right time. Her eyes widened. Grandpa, I can't. Yes, you can, I said, placing it in her hands. Not because it's worth anything in money, but because it's worth everything in history. Every tick of that watch is a reminder of where you came from, and of the people who stood behind you. She closed her fingers around it like she was holding something fragile and precious. I'll take care of it. I promise. I know you will. The rain eased, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow across the table. Emily stood, leaning down to hug me tightly. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Em. Always. When she left, the apartment felt quiet again, but not empty. The weight I'd carried into that wedding was gone. Ryan and I might never be the closest of friends, but the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. I picked up my coffee and sat by the window, watching the street below come alive, kids splashing in puddles, neighbors heading to work, the world turning as it always does. Some people measure their lives in trophies, titles, or applause. I measured mine in the smiles I'd earned, the hands I'd held, the people I'd stood beside when it mattered. And as the watch in Emily's pocket ticked quietly on, I knew my time had been spent exactly the way it should have been.